This screencast is to support the teaching of this lesson, Going Out, and it's from Straightforward Pre-Intermediate. That's by Philip Kerr, Kerr, and it's published by Macmillan. And you're going to need a few things. Here's the student's book page and the teacher's book, as usual in this for the Straightforward. The teacher's notes are very good, lots of useful ideas here. And you've also got the language reference, so what's relevant here is prepositions of time and functional language. That's what we're looking at in this particular lesson. And you'll also need the audio files. There are 2 of them, which shall be emailed separately. So the main aim of this material is to introduce and practice the functional language or phrases for invitations and suggestions and the responses that we use. Okay. Also, it has a section on prepositions of time as well, introducing them and practicing them. And we have a sub-aim for skills of developing listening skills for gist and specific information. All right, so there's a lot going on. We need a lead-in to start off with, and the book suggests this speaking activity here. It's suggesting it because the idea of it links up with an activity that's here, but I think doing it at the beginning like this about the famous people is going to be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to suggest an alternative. Alright, so the topic is about going out to different places and going out to people's houses and things like that. So that's the kind of lead-in we want. So I think having a set of questions to discuss is a good idea. So let's just move it away from talking about going out with a famous person. So perhaps you could put up some pictures of places to go out where you live. Elicit ideas from the student, say, what are we talking about today? Yeah, we're talking about going out. And then you could put up some different questions. It could be focused on where the people live. So what do people do where you live? What do you like to do? Or you could make it a bit more general. You could say, what do families like to do? What do teenagers like to do? What do older people like to do? But I'd have a set of questions up on a slide or on the board. Talk about the first one together, including you, and then say, right, now I want you to talk about the other questions. I will listen. And then you can sit back and let the students warm themselves up talking about the topic. And then we're going to move into the listening stage. There are 2 dialogues. Both people being invited to things, obviously. So set the scene first by saying you're going to listen to 2 different conversations of people inviting people to do things, to go out. I want you to listen and decide how well do the people know each other and why are they telephoning. So this one here, and the teacher's book suggests just having on a slide or on the board writing how well ? And why ? Which I think is a good visual prompt. Play the first dialogue and get them to check in pairs and compare their answers or talk together in the online environment and then check the answer. And then do the second one. I'd suggest doing them separately. But sticking just to these questions here, we're just looking for a general understanding. And then we've got a more difficult task down here, which is a gap fill. That's absolutely fine the way it is, or you could change it to be true-false questions, and then your students are just writing T or F on another bit of paper, whatever you think is going to work best. Couple of words do jump out at me. Anniversary. Here, I wonder if my students know that. So perhaps earlier in the lesson, before they listen, I would pre-teach that word. And also in the listening, there is the very useful phrase, my place. Somebody inviting someone to my place. And I think that's pretty useful and also helps with the general understanding of the text. So that's 2 things I'd suggest pre-teaching before the students listen. Alright, so here's our target language, different phrases and responses for invitations and suggestions. There's a task here in the book that focuses on form, getting the students to decide whether the phrases are followed by the infinitive without to, or the infinitive with to, or the ing form. Obviously that's focusing on form, and we want to focus on meaning first. So at the end of the listening, I would then try to elicit the ways in which the people made invitations and suggestions on the listening. So say, oh, what did so-and-so say? He said, would you like to go? Yeah, try to elicit it. And another person said, shall we go to something? And then say, okay, are they polite ways of inviting people? Yes, they are. Okay, and then you're sort of ready to look at the form. You can do it exactly as it is here. Put this activity on a slide, do the first one together, and then the students try to do the other ones. But you have an alternative. This is a good site, WordWall. A good way of making different activities. It's free, so all you would need to do is create activity and then choose one of these. The two that I would suggest would be quiz. So you could put up the first part of the sentence, would you like? And then you could have three different options, A, B, or C, for go, to go, and going. And then you can get the students to shout out which ones they think is the correct one, and then you click on it to see if it's correct or not. Another really nice one is unjumble. Here you would type in the full sentence, so would you like to go to the cinema? And then when it appears in the activity, it'll be jumbled up, and then you can show it to the students sharing your screen, and then move it around yourself. So what do you think is the first word? What comes next? And that's another way of focusing on form. So you've got an alternative there to the activity in the book. And obviously we need to focus on the responses. How do we answer these invitations and suggestions? So I think it's a good idea to try and elicit some of these responses and then show the students what they are. And also really pointing out that these are very polite ways of saying no. Okay, I'd rather, or I'd rather not. I'd love to, but I'm afraid. That's very kind of you, but. Very nice ones to focus on. It does say here to look at the audio script to check your answers. I wouldn't do that, particularly online. It can take up a lot of time. I think you're better off just doing it yourself. And then, of course, we're going to need lots of drilling. Functional language needs lots of drilling because politeness is so important in connection with these exponents. The way you use your intonation and your pitch is really important. So, would you like to go to the cinema? I don't think so. Would you like to go to the cinema? You see how we raise our pitch for politeness. So some good old-fashioned drilling is going to be lovely at this stage and prepare the students for the speaking that's going to come later. And what do you need after you've presented some new language? Yep, you need some controlled practice, some practice where there's only one correct answer. And the clearest example of that is the gap fill. So we've got one here. It looks pretty decent actually. So I think I would just get the students to do this, obviously doing the first one together as an example first, and then letting them work alone to do the others. And then get them to talk together or pair check before class feedback. That will give you a good idea of where the problems lie and give them a chance to gain their confidence before whole class feedback. And extending on from that, there's a part here, exercise 3, when they need to add some sentences to those dialogues that they've already completed. And then work in pairs and practice the dialogue. I'm not sure I'm a fan of reading aloud. Really, I'm not sure that it really gives the pronunciation practice that the students really need. But in the online environment, I think it could be a valuable way to provide some speaking practice, maybe get them to try to focus on the intonation when they're practicing it aloud. You can do open pairs or closed pairs in a breakout room. And give some feedback on intonation and pronunciation. And then here's that idea for freer practice, which linked to the thing at the beginning of the material that we decided not to use. I think it's quite a fun idea. You could put up some pictures of famous people. Donald Trump, I think, would need to make an appearance at this point. Boris Johnson, perhaps, and then maybe some nice people. And just for a laugh, the students can decide, oh, I'm going to go out for an afternoon with Donald Trump. Okay, what could we do together? And then get the students maybe to write a dialogue between themselves and Donald Trump, or to act out a dialogue between themselves and Donald Trump. So an opportunity for breakout rooms here, and getting the students to practice their dialogues together and then perform them for the other people. I think that could work quite nicely. So the next section is about prepositions of time, very useful for students at this level. So the box here doesn't really engage the students, it just has the information. So we need to find a way of drawing the students in and making them focus on examples. Different ways to do that. One idea would be to have several sentences visible to the students that are correct or incorrect. For example, I like to go to my lessons on the afternoon. My birthday is at June, something like that, and see if the students can correct them. So you're sort of a little bit of a diagnostic test of what they already know. That would be one way to do it. Another way would be to use a quiz from WordWall, which we looked at earlier. And another way, which is quite nice, is to dictate the words. So get the students to write on a bit of paper 3 columns, in, at and on, and then you say one of the things and they have to write it in the correct column. So for example, they've made the columns in, at and on, and I would say June. Where do you write it? Under in June, on June, or at June? In June. Good. So write it in the June, in the in column. And then once you've done a couple of examples like that, you could just read out 4 or 5 more and the students write them in the columns. And then say, talk together, talk about your answers, and you can listen in and see what they've done. And then feedback at the end, creating 3 columns on a slide or on the board that show the way these different prepositions work. So obviously we're looking more at form here than meaning, and that's fine. Pronunciation wise, it might be worth drilling some of them with at, because the at becomes weak. Remember that the weak forms often have always have the schwa form in them because they're unstressed words. So we don't say, I'm going there at the weekend, I'm going there at the weekend, I'm going there at the weekend. So probably worth focusing on the pronunciation of that particular one. So we've presented and now we need some practice. There is a lovely idea in the teacher's book for a substitution drill. So have a look at that to see if you'd like to have a go at it. It does look really useful. And I'd probably do that either to replace number 1 or just before number 1, okay, because it's controlled practice, the type of practice that only has 1 correct answer. So look at the substitution drill. Equally, you've got exercise 1 here, do an example together, let them do it, peers talk together, and then classroom feedback. And then they need to have a look at this one here. Complete the sentences with in, at, on, or a time expression. So the most popular time to get married is da da. All right. And they're talking about their own countries or about Britain. All right. So getting into a bit of less controlled practice here because they've got a bit more of an option. There's not just one correct answer. They could complete the sentences in any way, but get them to really think about the context that they're talking about. Are they talking about the city they're living in now, or are they talking about their hometown? All right. Needs a nice clear example. And then they can talk together at the end. And this is about as free as the practice gets in the book. I think that's quite a good point to get to, but I wonder if it's possible to go a little bit further. You could put up some prompts on the board like summer, winter, older people, younger people, and then just say to the students, talk about your country. What do people like to do when they're going out? And you could give a model to say that, well, in my country, in the summer, everybody likes to go out into the sunshine because we don't get much of it. But in winter, for example, in December, A lot of people like to stay at home because it's quite cold. You could give an example there just to get a bit more of a freer personalized activity going at the end. All right, and that's the end of this section.